Hello and welcome to Books to Last, the podcast that challenges readers to pick the only 5 books they may take with them when cast away to a mystery remote location. As ever, I am joined by a book-loving guest, and this episode I'm joined by Patrick. Welcome. It's so great to have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
I am so glad to hear that. I can't wait to get into the list of books that you've brought for us, but for the benefit of any listeners who might not be familiar with you and what you do, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and books?
Sure. Not a big fan of labels, but I am currently labeled as a poet and satirist. So maybe we start with that. I acquainted myself with writing during COVID lockdown. I hadn't written for 25 years prior to that, but during COVID lockdown, obviously, we all had an incredibly large amount of free time available to think. And I started a blog, a weekly blog called Life Sucks, Laugh Here. And it was meant to be a satirical blog weekly of all the current events that were happening in the maddening world of COVID lockdown at the time in 2020. And it reopened my heart to writing again. Did it throughout most of 2020 until a boss at a company I had told me it was too satirical and maybe too vulgar at times that I had to take it down. So I stopped there and then started writing poetry, ironically. At the time, I was very involved with Twitter and now X, but a large community of poets there that kind of interacted with each other and encouraged each other. And one thing led to another. Over a couple of years, I've published over 60 poems and 20 anthologies and some online journals, really asserting myself now to publish some poetry. Most of what I do in my full time when I'm not working my day job is write poetry, submitting to big journals like Plowshares and the Kenya Review and Paris Review and some of the big names, trying to get a little branding behind my name. In that period, I met up with a publisher who was interested in taking my blog stories and turning it into a book. And so that book ended up being shortened down to Life Sucks. And it's a reflective on COVID lockdown, but I think there's probably some cautionary tale, as with any good satire, I think applicable today. And we felt like it was a really good time with the U.S. election coming back, with Cheeto Christ II coming around and taking things over. We call it the second reign of Cheeto Christ. And it just reopened a lot of old wounds, let's call it, and some room for that satire to really marinate out in the world. So brings us to where we are today, promoting that book. My current job's a day job. I'm vice president of sales for a medical software company, believe it or not. So
very different.
Yeah, not your typical author who works at a publishing company or is an editor. I always say I have 2 jobs. I have my left brain job, which is sales and managing a U.S.-based work team. Yeah. I have my right brain. My office is actually set up that way. Where we are right now is my creative station, and over here is my workstation, which is, I almost have to retool my brain that way. And finding a lot of time, early mornings, evenings, weekends, still actively writing. It's a solid 40 hours a week still of writing on top of day job too.
That's great. I love the fact that you came back to it after so many years, because I think in today's time, there's a big glorification of being the youngest to do certain things, and this person in their sort of teens, 20s published this. But a lot of the most interesting, especially debuts that I've read of late, have come from not 20-year-olds, basically. And yep. I think one of the reasons that they are more interesting is the same reason why most things are more interesting, is because, like, when you've got more experience in life, this is not like to throw shade on 20-year-old writers. You're all very talented. But I don't think that publishing necessarily seeks out the converse of that, basically.
Agreed. Completely. And one of my daughters in particular is an excellent poet in her own right. She's younger, and her work is just so different. Yeah. It's informed from a different lens than maybe mine would be informed through. I tend to gravitate a little more towards kind of new formalism. I like the Romantics. I'm in love with the Romantics. I can read their poetry all the time, but you don't see that very often in literary journals anymore.
To be fair, I find I'm not a big poetry person. I always say I don't have anything against poetry. I just haven't found the right poetry for me, is my opinion on it at the moment.
Yeah.
So I keep picking stuff up, and it's not that I don't like it. It just doesn't resonate with me in the same way that like long form novels do. But the poems that I have liked the most have tend to be more classical poetry and sort of 19th century, that sort of era of poetry, as opposed to the sort of more experimental modern stuff that seems to be written as much today.
It is funny. I think everybody has an aesthetic that appeals to them. You're an artist or an author or a poet. I don't think it matters. I think there's an aesthetic that resonates with you. One of the things I'm trying to do now is push myself towards modernity, let's call it. That sense of what my daughter can do with it very fluidly, with a lot of ease. And I really love pushing myself for that. I just worry it feels a little inauthentic sometimes, that's what I worry about.
When you push yourself outside of your comfort zone, especially with something like writing, you may end up finding some sort of middle ground hybrid between the two that actually is sort of somewhere you might have ended in there before. So yeah, that's all really interesting. And it's a really productive thing to come out of lockdown, because I think my husband learned how to knit during lockdown. Very brief.
I dyed my wife's hair during it. I got really good to be her personal hairdresser, so I remember.
That is, I don't know if that's like a huge token of trust that your wife let you knit her hair, or the fact that she had no choice and knew nobody was going to see it.
More that than the first, I think. And it was a case of wine a week type living too. Yeah, I think we didn't really care as much.
Sounded like a good idea.
Yeah, it was a good party.
That sounds great. I hope she returned the favor and dyed your hair as well.
Well, you say to her all the time, you get that gray squirrel look going. I'm ready.
Brilliant. So you obviously write your own satire and poetry. We're going to get a little bit into the kind of stuff you read. Do you find that what you read is very similar to what you write, or do you go in a whole different direction?
A whole different direction. In all seriousness, you'll laugh. When we go through the books, you're going to be like, are you serious? Where's I think there is a tie-in to the poetry, and I think it informs it, especially the poetry. I think you'll see where that comes from. But I tend to read sci-fi and fantasy and hard literature, like true, egghead literature, and love that. Yeah, no, it's funny. My reading is very different from my writing.
Okay, I'm interested, very intrigued. It piqued my interest definitely with that, especially because those are all the genres I really like to read as well. So I'm excited just to chat books. As ever, guests get to pick the 5 books they're going to pick, the places they're going to take their 5 books to, because you don't have to go to a desert island. Where would you like to go to?
Oh, boy. I mean, to me, so my family emigrated during the potato famine from Ireland. So we've been in the U.S. a really long time, but we go back to the motherland every year. And it's a tradition. We have no family there anymore, but we just go back.
Yeah.
In the most remote parts of County Donegal, on the ocean, on a cliff with a bunch of sheep around me, staring at the waves crashing against the shore. That's where I would, if you could strand me anywhere, I'm good.
Sounds wonderful. Are you going to be in some sort of castle or a shack?
Oh no, I gotta have a castle. I want some dun, some ancient Irish dun that's all moss ridden and leaky, and oh god, that'd be amazing.
Wonderful, but a nice fire to sit next to and read. Yes.
But a peat fire. Nobody lets you have it anymore environmentally, but like those peat fires smell so amazing.
Who is going to find you and figure that out if you're off in the middle of nowhere? So I reckon you can get away with it, definitely. I don't, unless you've got like a really militant neighborhood watch in that area.
Unless the sheep come up and complain, I think we're probably pretty good.
Who's going to listen to them? They're sheep. Yeah. Anyway, so we're off to a castle in Ireland. Sounds glorious. What is the first book you're going to be taking with you?
So, huge J.R.R. Tolkien fan. Let's start with what started me off as a kid, which is The Lord of the Rings. But I want to focus in on the Fellowship of the Ring, in particular, the first book of the trilogy.
Yes, you'll be able to see my 2 sets of Lord of the Rings behind me.
I wish I had. My wife got me about 10 years ago a leather-bound edition. It's all in one set. It's like a treasure. I love that book so much.
Yes. Okay, tell me about why Fellowship of the Ring. Why is that your favorite?
I think it's the first book I ever read that did 2 things for me, because I was probably 9 or 10 years old when we read that. No, it might have been a little after. We read The Hobbit first in school. And that was like a record player, aging myself on that one. But the teacher would play it on a record player, and it was actually Tolkien reading the book.
Oh, wow. No, I'm jealous.
Oh, it was so cool. So we're in 4th grade. We were 9, 10 years old. It got
no appreciation for what you would.
But all little kids love dragons and magic and wizards and all the things that fuel your brain as a kid. Fellowship of the Ring took me to a place that scared me, where Bilbo's adventures were a little more, I don't know, winsome. They weren't.
They are basically encapsulated in that gif of him from the movie running off saying, I'm going on an adventure.
Exactly. Smaug was a little scary, and certainly the way they remade the movies and stuff, they made Smaug a lot more menacing as a dragon. But the ring wraiths, the 9 who serve the Dark Lord who are chasing the hobbits in the beginning. I was terrified. It kept me up at night. So I think it's the first book that emotionally hooked me, like in a way that fear. That was it. I was stuck.
It's always a great feeling. It's quite hard, I think, because obviously with Lord of the Rings, it was meant to be that Tolkien wrote it with the idea that it would be consumed as one piece of work, and then obviously it got separated for publishing reasons, which I completely understand because that would be a slog to get through in one.
It's a big read. That'd be like reading the Bible in one sentence. Too much.
It would be pretty tricky, but I'm interested because Tolkien, obviously, it's not written as an outright satire, but I do think that there is satire interwoven into that, and I wondered what you felt about that as in fantasy, especially. I feel like you can be a little bit more on the nose.
I'm a big fan of reading the book for what the book says and not bring the author into it too much. But with Tolkien, you almost can't help yourself because he was a linguist, because he created the Elven language even before he ever wrote the book. I mean, all that stuff to me geeked out as a kid. I was so into it. I learned to speak Elven. Oh my God, it's a wonder I never had a girlfriend until I was 14 weeks. But the sense of awe from it. And then I think that back to the, what we'll call it, allegorical. I don't think it was, but I think there was social commentary about what we do to the environment in the book, because he was a pretty big environmentalist.
That's the big thing that stood out to me, like Treebeard's, you can't call them rants because they're not fast enough, but everything Treebeard says in his chapter in The Two Towers is, you could basically copy paste that straight into some sort of environmental campaign. Now,
and there was a certain sense of damning technology too. Men are almost the anti-heroes in the book. Boromir's journey and all the things in Gondor, and how men are inferior to all the other races that exist in Middle Earth. So he definitely was going for an indictment on that, to some degree. Progress, how technology is destroying this beautiful world.
Yes. Okay, I completely with you though. When it comes to fantasy, I tend to I read it as a fantasy for what it is and for the magic. And I do like it when there's something in there, but I don't need to have it. But yeah, Treebeard is one of my favorite characters because I can't quote it off the top of my head, but his bit about why should I help them? They've done nothing but hurt me.
Totally. Right?
Is just it's one of my favorite parts in the book. Yeah, no, which is obviously The Two Towers. Fellowship of the Ring, though, is a great setup to the whole series. And
I love the whole notion of, I think it's a quote from the book, or I'm sub-quoting it anyway, but it's not all who wander are lost.
Yeah.
And that's a theme, or the motif anyway, that goes through all the books. But it's this sense of, I don't know, the unifying power of friendship. And so you're never alone, even when you feel most alone. And I think Tolkien really tapped into something primitive there, something feral there, that it really spoke to me. And as an adult, it even speaks to me.
Yeah, and there's a reason why he's basically the foundation stone of basically all the fantasy and that came after.
Game of Thrones could have never existed if it wasn't for Tolkien.
To be honest, I'd argue most of the fantasy genre couldn't exist. If not all, could probably not exist. Sci-fi is its own thing.
I don't know if you ever read Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time. It's not one of my books, but the series The Wheel of Time. But it's very Tolkien-esque in its approach. They swear more. It's not as classy maybe as Tolkien made. Tolkien made fantasy classic.
Yeah, it's very classy enough.
Yeah. It was very nothing crass about it. Thinking of my book when I think of how many crass parts are in my book. So
yeah, that's very much. God, I always get their names mixed up. Not Eowyn.
Yeah.
Basically, that entire arc with her, I'm just someone needs to swear at this character. This is he's being too polite.
He's writing at such a high level. It's nothing I've ever written stays at that level like that, where it's so classy is all the only word that comes to mind for is this classy kind of style of writing that nobody writes that way anymore.
No. Okay, it's a great intro. I love where this is going. What's the second book you'll be taking with you?
The second book came soon after that, and it actually started me seeing it as a cartoon. It was Watership Down. So Richard Adams' book, Watership Down. It's about the rabbit. It's an allegory. It's like 1984 in a way. It's an allegory of rabbits, and the one rabbit is psychic. And he senses this doom coming to their warren where they live. So they get a group of them and they go on an adventure. And mankind comes in and bulldozes the whole area, kills who stay behind. And I think it was mistakenly listed as a children's book. And I've
Yeah,
never
I always think of Watership Down as a children's book. I always just see the picture with the rabbit on the front, and I'm like,
but Adams created this mythology, that this sense of the rabbit god and the creation story behind the rabbits, and how there's a language that he brings into it too that makes it so interesting, because the rabbits are like Hazel and Daffodil, and like they all have these kind of basic nature names. But the rabbit god is like El Havra, and they have the black rabbit of Inlay that takes you on to the afterlife. And there's a whole mythology he built up. And the funny thing is, this was what he'd take long car rides with his daughters, and he would make this story up in the car for them. And he's like, Jesus, it's actually really good. And he transposed it.
yeah.
And I remember the story because I saw an interview with him years ago. 13 publishers rejected the book, and he just stuck with it and finally got it published. Now it's considered in the canon of elite children's literature, which still don't know why it's children's literature. But
They say that about a lot of some of the most popular books that get rejected by however many numbers. It's basically like one of those things that get passed around. It's why people are constantly told that if they can't deal with rejection or I don't know, criticism in that sort of way, then maybe they're not cut out for published, right?
I've spent 30 years in sales, and I can tell you, so publishing's a joke in comparison. You get real thick skin really quick doing what I've done for a long time.
Yeah, I don't know, it's one of those things, isn't it? It's kind of luck of the draw. It comes down to whose desk it lands on. Everyone's just doing a job at the end.
It's all opinion, right? It's aesthetic taste and
Exactly.
opinion really is what publishing comes down to.
Yeah, exactly. And no one wants to be one of those dozen or so people who passed over something that becomes the next multi-billion-dollar.
I mean, how many books can you think of? There's so many books that fall
So
in that
many.
category. Posthumous
Yeah.
success for people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't know Watership Down was one of those. It's one of those, it's a book that I've heard a lot about. It's one of those, if you've ever considered yourself something of a bookworm, it's not a title you could ever have avoided. But I didn't know that it was a story that he told his kids. I find I always like that background story because, like, Rick Riordan, for instance, who writes the Percy Jackson novels, he invented that story to tell it his son. And his son was the one who was like, oh, this is actually pretty good, Dad. Do you think maybe you should write it?
It's funny, my daughters and I, when they were growing up, we read fantasy. Every Harry Potter book that came out, we had copies of it, and we'd have a contest who could finish it first. And, like, we were really competitive with, like, our Harry Potter knowledge. I lose that. Now, my daughter played Quidditch in college, so she's totally Harry Potter now.
Yeah, I did come from a big reading household, really. I had, like, my grandma read, but she was very much like Catherine Cookson, Maid Bintry, that sort of, like, category. Yeah. And she reads almost categorically books that I would never pick up because they're all sad and they're like Lifetime movies, and that's
unreadable for me. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. But we have some crossover. So, like, she loves Agatha Christie. I've developed a love for Agatha Christie, and I managed to get her to read a lot of my sort of YA fantasy, which she really enjoyed.
We read them all. We read The Hunger Games. We read Percy Jackson. We read, I loved them. I gobbled them up. Loved them.
Yeah, she really loved Twilight, and she loved The Hunger Games. So when I gave them to her, she was just like, I think it was just so different from anything she'd ever read before. She was like...
That's adorable, actually.
Mind blown.
Awesome.
It's like in a 60.
And you think about some of these YA books have a sense of sensuality to them, like Twilight, that whole vampire mystique, right? There's just that. And I think a lot of older people were drawn to that sense of, I don't know, forbidden love. I don't know what you would call it, but the taboo there a little bit.
I think it was just, she was someone who would read anything. And if I'd put anything in front of her, she would have probably read it anyway, because she would just read very vociferously, if that's the word I'm looking for. But it just wasn't what she had always defaulted to reading. So yeah, I find that all really fun. But because I didn't read a lot with my parents, I found that I had to very much develop my own sort of taste in books.
My dad liked to watch the fights on TV and not much of a fan of reading books. So we definitely didn't do a lot of, it was funny, me being an English major in college too, because just of all the things I could have been was not how we were raised at all.
I do think my dad didn't realize that he'd caught onto a new trick until I asked for books for birthday or Christmas or something. And he'd gone onto Amazon and realized that, like, you could buy loads of them secondhand for dirt cheap and with free postage. And he was like, oh, do you mind? And I'm like, no, I don't need new ones. Just books is fine. And he was just like buying loads of them because he was like, this is great. These are incredibly cheap and they make her very happy. Isn't that great?
But that's come my thing with Kindle Unlimited, right? Is like you just download so many books. And I just can lay. My wife falls asleep hours before me, so I'll just lay with my iPad out at night reading on the Kindle app, and I get the reading done.
Yes. Okay. We've reached the midway point. What is the third book you'll be taking with you?
Okay, so now we're going to get a little more literature in here. So William Faulkner, I took 3 courses in college about William Faulkner. I love Southern Gothic literature. So the book is The Sound and the Fury.
Okay.
Yeah, we had an advanced placement English class my senior year of high school so we got college credits basically for taking this class.
Yeah.
And we had an actual professor run the class, so it wasn't a normal high school teacher. And she was flower child hippie. We started the whole work with reading Macbeth. And this quote, The Sound and the Fury, is a direct quote from Macbeth. And this book blew my mind. Like I have never read anything quite like it because it tells a story of the decomposition of this Southern aristocracy family called the Compsons. And the same story is told through 4 different lenses. So there's 4 sections to the book. The first section's told by a mentally impaired person, castrated. It's all stream of consciousness. It's almost done. You don't know what you're reading. It's gobbledygook. The first 60 pages of the book, you're lost. Then you come to the second section of the book with his brother who commits suicide. You figure out through the course of the book, but he's telling the same story, but through a lens of a much more selfish kind of point of view. A narcissistic one would say that there's never a character of the sister in the book, but she gets pregnant out of wedlock and it's a taboo and it's the judgment of the family and the mother and the grandmother. And this guy's bizarre kind of relationship with his sister too, that it feels just even borderline creepy a little. The way he talks about her and ideates about her. And it just progresses from there to the 4th section of the book where it's told from the housekeeper for the family. So there's a racial element to it in the Southern. It used to have a lot of black servants, even post-slavery. And so the book really tackles some pretty hard topics about how do we treat the mentally challenged and what is incest and what is racism. And you have to read the book in its entirety to then come back to the first section, understand what Benji is talking about in the kind of stream of consciousness. And it literally blew my mind. I was like, this is the most brilliant piece of writing I've ever read.
I've never heard of it. But that is just because I fell out with classic American literature pretty early in my life and I've really struggled to try and reconnect with it. So I'm determined to find at least one classic American author that I can get on.
Faulkner, Light in August. I'm trying to think of some of his other books. I've read probably every one of his books, studied every one of his books at a collegiate level. And he's very approachable, but it's literature, right? The symbolism and the good use of all these literary devices he incorporates into it. You could study it just on the quality of the writing. You can sell me on Gothic literature from pretty much anywhere in the world, I think, because I think it's just great. It's as close as I come to horror because I'm a baby. But Anne Rice for you? You don't like the Anne Rice stuff?
I can't say I've tried it because I just can't do. I find classic Gothic literature is just spooky enough that it stays at spooky instead of being outright scary and gory. And
Poe did it perfectly. Poe did it perfectly, in my opinion. Poe was the perfect Gothic poet, Gothic author.
It's not even necessarily the gore that's the issue with me. It's just the themes that are really poppy with it. I can't get on with it. And I'm just like, I read for fun. I can't be having an argument with the book about whether it was necessary that be included.
Or have nightmares. It's enough to read the book and not invade your sleep.
Yes, definitely that. But yeah, Faulkner is actually, I feel like I know the name, but I don't know if I'm getting it mixed up with something else. You studied it. Do you find that you approach it differently than you read other books because you've studied it? Or are you able to set aside the more analytical element where you're like, oh, I see that by that word he meant to infer this, imply this particular feeling?
If yes and no answer, because I know it, I take it from a critical thinking standpoint, probably more than a pure reader's perspective. So I don't know that I've enjoyed his work. I've studied it so much. I don't know that I can enjoy his work from a pure enjoyment standpoint.
Yeah.
And I don't know that 1920s U.S. Southern Gothic kind of this antebellum sense of, and all the bad things that were happening in the South of the U.S. at the time, if you're not born there, you almost have to study it ahead of time to understand the references and what it means.
Yeah.
So it helps to study it.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that the average reader would pick it up as from anywhere around the world and go, oh, use a little bit of Americana. I don't think they would do that.
No, and it's not something that's, I suppose, taught as widely. The post the sort of transatlantic slave trade, there's not really a lot that's taught on that period in America specifically, unless you do a lot on the Depression. And but even then, that's a completely different set of things that's being taught.
And honestly, you almost have to pair it with a history class so you'd understand the context of the time it was written into. So you really want to understand America if you're actually taking those classes. That's what I found with a lot of my Brit Lit classes that I took, like British literature classes and stuff, that it was like that for me too. I lacked a little bit of the frame of reference.
Yeah, definitely. I think I would struggle to understand how anyone could pick up, say, Austen's quite universal, but something like Dickens or trying to read any of that without a pretty strong understanding of what Britain was like during the Industrial Revolution.
That's what I'll do. I'll find some like Netflix series about the Industrial Revolution in Britain, and then I'll watch that, then read a book to get it better. But yeah, it's work to get there.
Yeah, I suppose if you're invested in it, then definitely maybe it was something worth going into. And I think, I don't know, even if it is a little bit of extra work, I like to get those. It's interesting to get those layers of meaning, and having a fiction text alongside history, I think, adds a little bit more depth and nuance and colour to it that you maybe don't get when you read purely the non-fiction accounts.
Completely.
Especially if it's contemporary to the time when it was being written. So that's, always quite good. Some, hard hitters all the way through from the sounds of it.
We're definitely getting eclectic. It's going to progressively get more eclectic.
We're on the penultimate book. What is the fourth book you'll be taking with you?
So, love James Joyce. And I would not be doing my heritage any disservice unless... But you talk about hard read.
James Joyce. I mean, the language was original. I can't read James Joyce.
I tried to read Ulysses many times. And this isn't Ulysses. This is A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, which I don't know. I don't know how early in his career. I don't know enough about Joyce, I'd say, per se, to know how early in his career he wrote this, but I have a sense it was pretty early. You get to Ulysses, which is like his ultimate work. It's unreadable. It's a 7-page sentence just to end. I can't think. My mind doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I've got like this ingrained bias against anything with Ulysses associated with it, because in my head Ulysses is the alternative name for Odysseus, isn't it? Depending on and I'm like, he's Odysseus. That's his name. This is the whole. It's an Odyssey.
It's the Odyssey. It doesn't
make sense if you change his name. But anyway, so you've chosen not Ulysses, a different book.
A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. It was a book, though I can't say I understood it completely. Let's start with that. And I don't know that you read Joyce for comprehension. I think you read Joyce for the appreciation of language. There's a poetry to his writing that's pretty beautiful.
Yeah.
Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man is this disaffected kid in Dublin who's sick of being Catholic and sick of nationalism in Ireland and sick of Dublin life, and just... like Joyce himself got the hell out of Dublin and went to France and Italy and basically spent the rest of his life expatriated. He reaches this kind of artistic aesthetic where he was getting no fulfillment from anything in life, whether it was from a life of debauchery to a life of value to family to nationalism to all the kind of themes of being an Irishman in Dublin at that point in time would mean. He embraces art and literature and writing as his almost God. I know it's maybe not quite that profound, but it's that sense of fulfillment in his life. And I felt the evolution of my life has been like that too. Family's great, but they have their place, and work is great, and USA is great, whatever. But like art has always been the central theme of my life. Even when I wasn't writing, I was reading a ton and going to museums, and you just very artistically involved, if not contributing. And I get
like a North Star kind of feeling. Like that's
Totally. And Joyce just, like I said, I mean, the poetry of his words is so brilliant to me. And he had to have been a bit crazy. Like, I don't know how you produce what he wrote and not be a little nuts.
They say it's a requirement to produce masterpiece.
He was, I don't know, you get a lot of arguments. I know I took a class in college about this and whether this was autobiographical about not, because he uniquely we actually studied the whole Greek mythology of Icarus and Daedalus because the key character is Stephen Daedalus. It's pretty on the nose. It's not being indirect.
He's got an interesting sort of, arc in mythology.
But the whole idea was Daedalus was the creator of the labyrinth, right? Is that Dublin had become the labyrinth to him. And it was that sense of disassociation from the monster he was a part of and getting away from it. There was something to it that was really smart to me that said, wow, literary illusion actually works. You actually incorporate mythology into things and be smart yet tell a good story at the same time.
Yeah, I do love this sort of puzzling over, especially with classical texts where there's no way to confirm it one way or the other. Is this autobiographical or is it not? Because it's impossible to know what's going on in someone's head unless they outright point. And even then, they could be lying. So it's like with Tolstoy. There's so many arguments about whether is he Levin, is he not Levin. So it's always really an interesting thought experiment to really bring the tone down a little bit. My favorite version is that I saw a meme on the internet that was saying, "Oh, I love the flex of Jane Austen naming the most attractive character in all of her books Jane."
Of course.
And I'm just like, oh, that's absolutely true.
That's why I try so hard to read a book without the author in mind and just let the words represent what's happening in the book. Because I just think you take it down a whole nother path when you start to assign it to the person. I find that in my poetry. Like I have a poetry blog I put up every thousands of followers on it. And they're all 50s, middle-aged American and British women. It's unbelievable. It's like how much of the population is a very specific gender and a specific age. And they always want to know about me. And I'm always like, I'm not writing about me. Most of it's really about me. I don't think, maybe psychologically. But...
yeah, it's difficult. I was looking into this a little bit myself because how do you write characters who are diametrically different from yourself? And how do you prevent every character from being just you and your voice? And it's a difficult thing to unpack, which I think if the creator can't even do it, then how are people from the outside supposed to do it?
It's what's prevented me from writing a novel at this point is that sense of, can I authenticate an actual character that I don't inform, right?
Yes.
Especially when you talk about someone gender separate from you. And I always want to write about outlier characters. And I'm okay with that conceptually, but I've never walked in the shoes of a trans kid before. I wouldn't even know. I wouldn't do them any honor, to be their voice if I was trying to. No?
Yeah, and it's not even, I think there's been a lot of discussions about that because there are a lot of authors who have tried it as well, and it's not, good intentions only get you so far. And it's one of those things where it's a really difficult thing to unpack, and that's why I know there's a lot of people of a certain persuasion who get really irritated about discussions about who can tell whose story, but the whole point is, it's not even necessarily who's allowed to tell it, it's who's going to tell it, because... it's very easy. Yeah, it's very easy to tell a story about someone whose just experience is completely different from yours and just do it completely wrong. It's your idea of what it should be, not what it actually is, which means it's just not as good. Like, you can't be surprised then when people who do have that identity don't resonate with it. It's about quality. It's not even necessarily about anything else.
I think we write what we know is an old axiom. I don't know that it's necessarily true, but I think for plot purposes, you almost have to have lived it to tell it authentically to some degree. And I avoid trying to talk about things I'm not well-versed in. I become very uncomfortable in that place that I'm not doing justice.
Yes, I feel like that's that's where I come from. It's completely reasonable. Stipulations to put on yourself. Okay, James Joyce, I definitely wasn't expecting James Joyce, I'm going to be honest.
A lit head.
Maybe I should have given the setting, but I am really excited to see what you close this list out with. What is the last book that you're going to be taking with you?
So this is the real curveball here. Toni Morrison, Song of Solomon.
Ooh, okay. I've heard of Beloved and a few others. Tell me about Song of Solomon.
So it's more my love for Toni Morrison. I've read everything she wrote. She's not alive anymore. She's contemporary. This is like I was saying, it informs me on something. She writes very much about the Black condition in the U.S. and creating a mythos behind it. This book, Song of Solomon, talks about a race of Black people who could fly, and they flew back to Africa.
Yeah.
So the idea of the book is very modern, but it's the fantasy undergirding it is so intelligent and meaningful. I read it because I'm the other reading that book, right? I'm a white guy reading this book in a way that I could never write a book like this unless I made it like Irish mythology or something. I can't. I can't relate in a way that I could write it,
No.
but to read it for me is something so respectful and magical and really when I read her work. If I had to pick a favorite author, it would be Toni Morrison. She is brilliant.
It sounds amazing. I think, apologies. I think, especially with, there's kind of a shine when people want to write, I suppose, literary fiction about a difficult topic, the condition of Black people, or even racism, or even like with the Troubles and that sort of thing. People find it really difficult to, I don't know, it's not as common for people to go in a more fantasy kind of magical realism or magical route, because there's this misconception that it needs to be gritty and completely based in reality to be able to get the point across, I think. And I actually find that actually sometimes having the sort of more, and I think that's more common now because there's a lot of books that have been written from all different parts of the world and from authors of different cultures who are adopting more different genres and more genre books to illustrate the same points. And I think I think it opens it up to maybe a wider audience and also brings a completely different scope on it in a way that you maybe don't get if you're saying very real, like in reality. That's
what I think I like it, because you use the term magical realism, and that's what this is. This book is a book of magical realism for sure. The way Morrison did it, like especially names in this book, the mother figure of the family is Pilate, but it's like an inversion of the Pilate story with Jesus. She's like almost like an oracle in a way, and teaches. I could go on and on about the book, but if you've not read Toni Morrison, this is a great entrance into her work, because like the Beloved, she won, I don't know if she won a Nobel or a Pulitzer for that's been made into movies. No one's ever made the Song of Solomon. I'm dying to see this as a movie someday.
Yeah, maybe. I've been really in love with sort of TV or series adaptations of books recently, because I feel like they tend to do slightly more justice to the sort of detail, especially if there's a lot going on in there.
Agreed. Totally.
But yeah, I think hopefully they will, but I really appreciate a recommendation as a gateway into an author, because I find it, if you start with the wrong book, even if it's a brilliant book and even if it's a brilliant author, you can be given a very false impression of what that author's about. And then you can either scared off from the rest of their work or maybe even disappointed by it. Yeah, it's always good to have a good jumping off point for
it's always like when Barack Obama was president in the U.S., this was his favorite book.
Yes.
Was Song of Solomon. And I was like, oh my God. I know I liked you before. I like you so much more now.
That's incredibly high praise. Barack Obama, and very widely read from anything with the Obama's names on it. It's like the gold star.
Right. Yeah. Right after his presidency, when one of our trips to Ireland, we flew into Dublin, and it's about a 3-hour service he'll take you, because I don't drive over there anymore. You guys, I don't know how you drive on the side of the road.
We're in the wrong. It's only us and one other country that do the same side.
It is so brutal. Like I've tried so many times to drive, and I always ding up the car, do some damage to it 100% of the time. So we just said, pay a little money, we'll get a car service to take us. And there's a Barack Obama rest stop along the way up to Donegal from Dublin, which is really cool. We've got pictures standing in front of Obama.
I know America's got quite a long history and sort of connection with Ireland because of how many people obviously migrated over and stuff, and the community changed things. But I always am fascinated with how enchanted, I'm going to go with the word enchanted, how enchanted different presidents of the United States are with Ireland in particular as a country.
Yeah. The west of Ireland in particular is a very magical place. I mean, if a leprechaun walked out from behind the tree, I'd just be like, yeah, that's normal.
We've recently started rewatching Derry Girls, and
love that show.
We just watched the episode where Michelle is on about, they talk about tourists, and she just, they're probably at the Giant's Causeway tourists. I love the Giant's Causeway.
We went a couple years ago. My dad is like 83 going on 15 years old. Ever since my mom died, he's like a child again. Like he's a very healthy, vibrant 83-year-old. He's chasing girls everywhere he goes. And he was trying to pick up on women on the Giant's Causeway out there. We're out almost in the ocean, and he's flirting with 3 different women. I'm like, what is it?
Playing a dangerous game that close to the ocean, honestly.
Oh my God. Seriously, one shove, he's gone.
Oh, that's brilliant. Okay, we've got the 5 books. You promised an eclectic mix. We got an eclectic mix.
That is eclectic.
Would you mind doing a quick recap of all 5 so that people can run off to their local independent bookstore and buy them?
I've got them printed out here just so I don't lose track of it too, just to be official. Fellowship of the Ring, first book of the Lord of the Rings series by J.R.R. Tolkien. If you love high fantasy at its most noble and classy, this is something to read. If you want to scare your kids at night too, definitely get them into that first book with the ring wraiths chasing the hobbits. Gave me nightmares for a week. Second book is Watership Down by Richard Adams. Complete allegory. It's really about us, but it's rabbits as the main characters. The violence, it's just, if you want to create a brand new mythology, a creation story, everything, Watership Down scratches that itch for you. It's really brilliantly written. The third is The Sound and the Fury, William Faulkner. Anything Faulkner, I probably could blanket say that, but The Sound and the Fury, just because of the Macbeth quote as a title, is so cool. And a hard read, a challenging read, something that makes you rethink point of view from an author and the unreliable narrator concept. This book really teaches point of view and unreliable narrator. What's the true story when the same story is told by 4 different people? Brilliant piece of writing, though, for sure. Fourth would be A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. I don't know if I've read by James Joyce. I don't know if I recommend that for them. You've really got to be a lit head to read that, right? You really got to be a lit nerd to want to get in on that book. It is a hard read, a lot of stream of consciousness. It's just not a traditionally written book, but it's something that appealed to me heavily today anyway. And then fifth is Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. Again, I would say anything by Toni Morrison is fantastic. The Bluest Eye, Beloved, Sula. But Song of Solomon for me was what got me into Toni Morrison. And again, it's a book that creates a mythology out of reality, that magical realism, like we were saying before.
Yeah.
Couldn't recommend that book as an entry to Toni Morrison.
Yeah.
Some of her other books, they're good, but they're not. This is one of her best, for sure.
Yeah. I'm interested because you mentioned before we started recording that you're not really big into reading satire in your own time, but a lot of those books do have their own sort of didactic messages and overarching commentary on social ideas. So it's not satire, but it's not a million miles away in its ideas.
Oh, yeah. And those ideas take form. They're seedlings. They grow into something that they plant it in your head and it becomes your own in a different way.
And almost all of them are written in poetic and beautiful language as well. So, yeah.
You could take excerpt after excerpt from these books, and the beauty of the language is probably what ultimately drives me to all of them.
So satirical poetry, but by enough, and wearing another
mythology and some wizardry.
Yes, different, but by a different name. It's such a good list. I'm really interested to see what nearly made it but didn't quite. Have you got any honorable mentions?
Yeah, there was one for sure. Honorable mention was Pullman's books, Philip Pullman's books.
Okay.
His Dark Materials.
Yeah.
Golden Compass, I think, is the U.S. name of it. And then there's a British version of it, too. I don't know. Why would they do that?
So the Golden Compass was the movie here. We did have that. And then they did His Dark Materials, the TV show, which they actually used the proper name for. And then it's Northern Lights as the first book.
Northern Lights. That was in the UK, they released it that way. And in the is the Golden Compass.
Yes.
When it came out, I read the series with my daughter, and she was very affected by it because she was probably 11 or 12. And it's a pretty, like, the idea that God is dead is almost like Nietzsche-esque. You've reached into some nihilistic kind of not kid-friendly material.
Yes.
And we've never been super religious as a household, but enough so that you don't want your kid like becoming a nihilist at 11 or 12 years old. I don't want to shape that thinking. So our church locally banned those books.
Yeah.
And one was running
to make them unappealing to children at all.
Yeah, that's to me, that's like the crack. The kids at that point are instantly going, I must read this book. Make it taboo and they instantly want it.
Yeah, maybe they should ban like lots of like really instructive education.
Yeah, seriously. But I loved the whole series was amazing. It was super intelligent and philosophical. It was definitely something parents should read with their kids just because it's a lot. It's some heady stuff.
The ideas.
The warrior polar bear thing's cool, but that's not what the book's about at all. It's
no,
like your soul outside your body.
Yeah, and I think that's actually like it's a good point because ever since I had kids of my own, when I think about what they're going to read, I'm thinking I really need to read a lot of this because a lot of the stuff I know I was reading when I was younger. Not that I necessarily think my parents would have cared a great deal, but I'm like, looking back on that, I don't think I should have been reading that at that age. I think that may have done something to my squishy impressionable.
For sure. I read stuff I shouldn't have read as a kid. Hey,
Yeah. And it does depend on the kid, but definitely I get that because I think there can be a kind of ignorance with parents, especially because things are dressed up a certain way. And I've just, for instance, as an example off the top of my head, A Court of Thorns and Roses is an incredibly popular series by Sarah J. Maas, and it's marketed as fairy tales and elves. And I know what's in those books, and I would absolutely not be giving them to 12-year-olds. So I'm just, it's good to get a feel for it, but I understand how a lot of parents get misled because I was a misleading child.
Oh, yeah. To me, like, Pullman was brilliant, almost like Gaiman is, like Neil Gaiman is with his books too, because they're almost like almost all of them are almost like a retelling of a fairy tale.
They are.
Very
I do sometimes get them mixed up because Pullman and Neil Gaiman, they occupy a similar place in my head.
Agreed,
Yeah.
totally. I think the one other book I'd come out with, it just reminded me, flashback to college, because I just watched Apocalypse Now for the first time, the movie, and when I was in college, and we studied Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness.
Okay. Yes.
And that's basically what the whole movie Apocalypse Now is based on, although Heart of Darkness is a journey up the Congo. And that book was a masterwork for me. Like, Conrad's writing was so brilliant.
I think Heart of Darkness was just picked on the podcast by a guest whose episode is not out as we record, but will be out before yours comes out. So yeah, people will have already heard about Heart of Darkness. That's a second recommendation for that. If anyone is
It's
listening.
fabulous. It's fabulous. And then for your audience, anybody who's watched Apocalypse Now, even though it's a Vietnam movie and it's about a crazy general in the jungle, like running his own little empire, that's what Heart of Darkness is, just in the 19th century. It's just magical, that book.
Yeah, eclectic, definitely really interesting list of books, and I've got some really great recommendations that I can go off about, maybe branching out into different genres, so that's always good. If people wanted to find your book, and hear more recommendations or hear more about work you are doing, where can they find you?
So a couple places. I think Ingram Spark distributes my books, so they're global. So you can look at Amazon's typically where people will go, Goodreads, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, all the online sites are carrying the books. If they want to just get to know me a little bit, I have two websites. At the poetry website's poetrybyps.com.
That's a great read.
I weekly just post a poem. Every Saturday I'll release a new poem to have an audience that just keeps coming back for that. Then when a book comes out, then obviously those two feed in nicely together. You never want to be the business person too much. You want to be the artist first, but a method to the madness at least. And then psconway.com is more of a blog. Right now I'm running a lot of funny satirical stuff there. I'm having a lot of fun with that because it's obnoxious, and it's more like my book Life Sucks that's out right now, which is, it's COVID lockdown, but it's life as we live it today. Satirical, funny, but a bit, I'd call it dark humor funny for sure.
Okay, I know many people who will definitely hit dark humor is a good selling hit for them.
Yeah, if someone tells me dark humor, I'm pretty much gobbling it up pretty quick. I love, but it's definitely for adults.
Yes. Okay, so for 18 plus only for...
Don't read to your 3-year-old. That would not be probably a good move.
Okay, so thank you so much for that discussion. I've had so much fun. If listeners wanted to follow the podcast, we're at Books to Last Pod on Instagram and nowhere else because social media is difficult. And if you like what you hear, subscribe, follow us, share with a friend, leave a review. That would be great. And yeah, Patrick, thank you so much for coming on. I've had so much fun. It's been great.
This is a great chat. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, listeners, thank you so much for listening. Patrick, thanks so much for joining me. And until next time, bye for now.